Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Peter here, hope you're doing well. And we're going to do another materials video. People seem to like it. I will say though that I find this super difficult, you know. It's kind of easier to describe a perfume because you're describing multiple things and you're kind of trying to paint a picture of, you know, how it smells. Like maybe it smells of cookies burning on a log fire sprinkled with chestnuts and drizzled in honey. You know, that's easy to kind of try and paint a picture like that. When you're describing an essential oil, it's very difficult to actually put that image in your head of what it smells like. So here we go. Last time we covered a few florals, so we're gonna, I think, cover woods today. There's a few different varieties of wood we can talk about. My favourite wood, I guess now, without really thinking too much, is probably oud. I've really fallen in love with oud oils, which I really honestly didn't think would happen. I think, myself included, you know, a while ago, people have generally the wrong impression of oud. People think it's dirty and smells shitty and nasty. And that's, yeah, some ouds do have that kind of fecal barnyard kind of vibe to it, which is obviously more of an acquired taste. But a lot of ouds don't smell like that at all. Like they smell amazing, beautiful. And so yeah, I've really fallen in love with ouds. My favourite characters are the darker ones that smell like earthy tones, like jungle earth and sand and kind of earthy and soily and incensey, like this one from Ensar. And then I have another oud there that's also kind of earthy in the dry down, but it has a sweeter honeyed top. And then we got more of an organic Thai oud. This is honeyed, sweet, floral kind of nuances to it. Beautiful. But we won't get too much into oud in this video because I've talked about it so much in those specific videos relating to oud. So typically for woods you would do steam distillation, which will bring us on to the first oil we'll talk about is cedarwood. Now there's different varieties of cedarwood, we'll cover a few here. So we've got 4 cedarwood oils here. 2 of them share similarities, the other 2 share similarities, so we'll go like this, starting with one of the common ones is Virginian cedarwood from the USA. And again, this is steam distilled. And the best way to characterize Virginian cedarwood is kind of like shaved pencil shavings. If you sharpen a pencil, that smell is pretty much Virginian cedarwood. Or you can think of a freshly shaved log, you know, like a cedar log, just shaving sawdust off the cedar log. So that pretty much is the best way to sum up Virginian cedar. Now that has a similarity to the profile of Texas cedarwood, which also has a similar kind of texture. So this one has a very similar kind of profile to Virginian. It might remind you of pencil shavings. It will remind you of sawdust and that kind of grain in the rough wood. You get a texture with these 2 oils where when it feels rough, you get a rough, grainy texture of the wood. And pretty much anyone that smells these oils would, even not, you know, I'm not talking about trained noses or anyone interested in perfume. I mean, in general, the world population, most would be able to identify that is wood. You might not guess cedarwood, but it smells woody. Whereas the next 2, in my opinion, if you did a blind test on these, it would be hit and miss whether someone is going to guess correctly that it's actually from wood. The scent is not what you would expect, it's quite unusual. So the next one we're going to talk about is Atlas cedarwood. And this one I find quite unusual. This one doesn't smell at all like Texas or Virginian. This is balsamic, almost to the point of being thick, creamy, milky. It's got a resinous kind of vibe to it, almost like something like benzoin, but minus the sweetness. And like I say, in a blind test with, you know, people that have no idea what these are and aren't an expert in different oils, I would imagine that most people aren't naturally going to gravitate to saying this smells of cedarwood or a chopped log, because it doesn't really, you know, it smells balsamic and milky and resinous, not what you would expect wood to smell like. You would definitely expect cedarwood to smell something more like Texas cedar, where it literally smells like the grain of the wood. So Atlas cedar, a little bit more unusual. So Atlas cedar wood is just a little bit more unusual and not what you would expect, which the same goes for the next one, which is Himalayan cedarwood. So this is from Nepal, and this has a similar relation to Atlas cedarwood, where you don't smell the grain of the wood, you don't smell that pencil shaving, you don't smell that rough kind of texture. This again is balsamic, almost milky, resinous, incredibly smooth. There's no kind of grainy texture here. And if anything, I mean, distillation, here's the problem with describing essential oils to people, is distillations can be different from where they're produced, who's produced them, how it was distilled, you know, the age of the trees, the weather, the soil, like literally everything can change, slight nuances with the end product, with the end, you know, yield of essential oil. So not all Himalayan cedarwoods are going to smell exactly like this one, is my point that I'm trying to say here. That goes for pretty much any natural product. So this smells more similar to Atlas. It's balsamic, it's milky. If anything, the difference between these two particular ones from Hermitage Oils is that the Himalayan, in comparison to the Atlas, has something a little bit industrial about it. Almost like it reminds me of diesel or some kind of chain oil, or something just not quite natural in a way. It smells like there's something industrial dropped in there, like there could be a little bit of chain oil from a chainsaw that's chopped the wood up and got into it. I mean, that's just the vibe that it gives to me. So there is a slight difference with the Atlas in that regard. They aren't exactly the same, but they definitely share that same balsamic, milky, unusual, not what you would expect wood to smell like, so to speak. So there you go, we've covered a few of the common cedarwood oils there. We'll go on to one of my favourite woods, which is Oakwood. Now I've got Oakwood CO2 extract, and Oakwood is beautiful. It's one of my favourite woody notes, and it does to me remind me of like an old oak chest or an oak barrel. Imagine, you know, an oak barrel, and it's literally what it smells of. It's super dark, it's smooth, it's got these amazing rich nuances, this ever so slightly spiced nuances, subtle elements like that. There's elements of something that could remind you of maybe even tobacco. It's very interesting. But it's dark, it's deep, and it's very smooth. Like you can imagine it's like a highly polished or, you know, perfectly sanded oak barrel. This hasn't got that kind of rough grain that Virginian cedarwood has or Texas cedarwood has, but it also doesn't have the milky characteristic that Atlas or, you know, Himalayan cedarwood has. Those are quite unique profiles. Again, Oakwood is different again. It doesn't smell milky or balsamic or resinous, and it doesn't smell like pencil shavings. This is, try to imagine like literally a beautifully smooth polished oak chest or oak barrel, and really a nice smelling wood. It's very lovely. And we'll go into Guaiac Wood, which is quite strong. So Guaiac Wood can remind you of a few things. It can smell meaty to some people, and what I mean by that is imagine kind of barbecue ribs. it has a texture of meat, like beef or something, or pork. It has a meatiness to it that kind of reminds you of a barbecue or barbecue sauce even. There's a smokiness there and a rich, dark, unusual kind of vibe. But imagine a smoky, almost burnt, dark wood. Very unusual, kind of interesting character, and yeah, I like it. Interesting if you want to use more of a charred kind of smoky wood in a fragrance, then Guaiac Wood is one of your best options for that. But very unique among the the smells of wood profiles. That's definitely easy to detect in fragrances, and it stands out as being quite unique among the other oils. Sandalwood, we've got Mysore Sandalwood from India. This is regarded as the most beautiful of sandalwood oils. I do have different ones. I've got Australian sandalwood and from different regions of India as well. That's not Mysore. But we'll talk about Mysore sandalwood specifically here. It's one of the most beautiful smelling woods you will ever put your nose on it. It's creamy, it's thick, it's smooth, it's much lighter than, this is going to sound silly, but with the other woods you can tell they're from a darker wood. You actually smell the colour in a way. When you smell sandalwood you can smell that this is from a lighter, paler coloured wood. It smells creamy and milky and blonde, you know, it has that kind of white creamy smell to it that you can tell it's not a dark wood. It's super smooth, although there is a slight grain to the wood, but it's a very smooth. There's almost nuances of spice, just like a sprinkling of something spiced, and just stunning. But very, I mean, like I say, I find it quite difficult to describe the scent of essential oils more than, you know, it's easier to describe a perfume. But sandalwood is very luxurious, very beautiful, and very unisex, whereas you could say maybe that something like Virginian cedarwood is inherently more leaning masculine, whereas sandalwood is either or, doesn't matter. And like Guaiac Wood you might associate with having a more slightly masculine tinge because of that dark, meaty kind of smokiness. Sandalwood is just stunning, absolutely beautiful. Anyone could wear sandalwood as a pure oil, or from an attar. Sandalwood is stunning. We'll talk about Australian sandalwood. I mean, it's still nice, obviously. It still has that sandalwood characteristic, obviously, because it's still sandalwood. It's just not quite as luxurious smelling, if you're going to be really picky. It just doesn't quite have that same rich character that Mysore sandalwood does. And I do have an aged Mysore sandalwood that's actually from 1930, very old, and it just gets better. Like, the older it is, the more beautiful it smells, and the richer and deeper the scent is. It's quite a stunning material. So yeah, so that's sandalwood. I don't know whether to touch upon synthetic woods or not, because that would make the video twice as long. We might cover synthetics maybe in a different video. So next, I guess we can talk about is fir trees, you know, like pine trees. So I have silver fir. This is steam distillation from trees in France. This is from Eden Botanicals in the US. This straight up smells like pine needles off a pine tree. There's loads of pine forests where I live, and I regularly walk the dog through pine forests, and I know what it smells like when you grind up pine needles in your hand and you smell your hand afterwards, and this is exactly what this smells of. So pine has kind of it has a greenness to it. It's a green, it's almost, it's green, it's almost slightly herbaceous, it's watery in a way. It's, again, has a spice kind of quality to it, and also reminds me slightly of frankincense, believe it or not. Frankincense has a resinous cooling effect, almost in the sense of menthol has a cooling effect. Frankincense has a similar cooling quality to it when you breathe frankincense, but in a resinous way. And fir or pine kind of smells in general have a little bit of that quality that reminds me personally a little bit of frankincense. But that would be good to use in things like incense accords, for example, because of that kind of relation to frankincense and that cooling quality. So we could talk about fir balsam and Peru balsam. Again, steam distillation. This one is from Canada, fir balsam. So this differs from silver fir in that it's similar. It has that kind of raw green quality. This particular one is slightly earthy, like imagine the greenness is on the floor of the forest, but it still has that kind of cooling frankincense-like vibe. Obviously a wet kind of damp greenness and an almost soily quality to it. But again, that can be just down to that particular distillation. Doesn't mean that all fir balsams are going to smell that way. And this has a slight sweetness to it as well. So Peru balsam, this is from El Salvador, which is in South America. So this smells more like benzoin or labdanum. It smells resinous and sweet and very smooth. But it also shares characteristics with Guaiac wood in the sense that this particular one has a little bit of a smoked kind of vibe. So imagine kind of maybe like a smoked kind of benzoin or labdanum, if that helps paint a picture. Next up we can talk about Palo Santo. This is actually a piece of raw, real Palo Santo wood. You can see the grain texture there on the wood. You can burn Palo Santo as incense, and it's used in incense accords in perfumery. So this one is from Ecuador, and this is extremely unusual. It shares similarities with Atlas and Himalayan cedar in the sense that this also has a weirdly milky balsamic profile. It doesn't have that grain of the wood. It's milky, but this has an industrial smell to it that reminds me of glue, industrial glue or paint thinner. This is very unusual. It has qualities of Atlas and Himalayan cedarwood in the sense that it has that milky, balsamic, unusual characteristic which doesn't smell of wood, of what you would think wood smells like. It's milky, it's unusual. So very artificial, chemical smelling, very strange. I think if you wanted to make some kind of gasoline accord or glue kind of smell, like an industrial smell in a perfume, this particular Palo Santo would work well for that kind of mission. Very unusual to me, is often used in incense accords, but again, to stress that that might just be this particular distillation. Doesn't mean that all Palo Santo oils have this gasoline kind of industrial glue, paint thinner kind of smell. Some of them might smell completely different. The one I have from Eden Botanicals, that's the vibe that it gives me. So I think we've talked enough, because I don't want to make the video ridiculously long, and I managed to paint a picture for you of what these kind of raw essential oils smell like. But there you go. I hope that was useful. If you want me to cover some more kind of specific things, I mean, we could maybe do gourmand things later, sweet things. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again soon. I will update you that I have to go away back to work soon, back offshore. I'll be gone for a full month, but it's not for another 2 weeks yet, so I'm hoping that I can film videos in advance and that they'll go out automatically while I'm away, and I'll be covered for the whole month, so it'll be like I'm not even gone. But the only difference is I won't be replying to comments, but I'll let you know before I'm going. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye everyone.